Hello, tile friends. Luke Miller here with the Tile Money Podcast. We've got another great interview for you today. I've got Kaleb Merrill in the studio with me from Rutland Tile Company out of Rutland, Vermont. Kaleb, how you doing today?
Fantastic, Luke. Thanks.
Great, great. Kaleb is a owner operator out of Rutland, and he does some incredible work. He specializes in builder work, and he is a really great guy. I've really gotten to know you a little bit over the years through the Facebook group and some of the private events we've done and stuff. So I've appreciated your demeanor and your disposition and your integrity when it comes to all things business and life. Kaleb, can you give us a little bit of a 10,000-foot overview on how you got into the trade and about how long ago that was and stuff, and your journey from where or to where you are today?
Sure. It was about 10 years ago. I got a phone call from my cousin, and his business was kind of stagnant, and he was interested in bringing someone in to kind of help him build the business back up again. And I had worked with him on and off in construction over the years. And so I partnered up with him in his business. And just kind of for the first year or two, just learning how to, all the steps of installing tile and learning all those things. And as time went on, got into the estimating portion of all that. So it was about 2.5, 3 years, I kind of took over the business side of it, all the estimating and the bookkeeping and all those things, which tend to be my strength. And it was about 4 years into that it was a time for a change. And so I took a break from tile for about a year. I went to the post office locally
Hmm.
and carried the mail for about a year, which I enjoyed. But postal management is not for those of us with strong personalities. So I decided to jump back into tile again. And so I started Rutland Tile Company. So it's been closed this September, I think. It'll be 5 years
On your own
um,
with this. Okay.
on my own. Yep, and that's kind of how I ended up where I am today. That's just the quick synopsis of how I got from no tile to all tile all the time.
Sure. Right on. And so what did the last 5 years look like? What did you get started? What kind of projects were you taking on? And um, what kind of projects are you taking on today?
So it really started. I had started Rutland Tile Company while I was still at the post office because I was doing side work. So I started that transition before I left. And the project that kind of pushed me over the edge to the point where I had to leave the post office if I was going to continue, with doing tile work. It was three bathrooms and a kitchen backsplash, and so there was no way that I could dedicate part time to it. So that was kind of how I, pushed myself into it. And I would say initially it kind of that was kind of a unicorn for the first year, the three bathroom one. Most of it was backsplashes, floors, a shower here and there, a tub surround. So they weren't necessarily large projects. But I got a shot, might have been a year and a half, 2 years in, with a new builder. And it was a large house. I don't remember what the numbers were. But it was three bathrooms, all custom marble mosaics, heated floors, like it was, all natural stone. Um, and so you might remember this, Luke, but I kind of went back and forth about how to approach this with the builder, as because I wasn't confident enough to give him an estimate for it.
Hmm.
And so we went back and forth about how to communicate to him about time and materials and all these things. And so I ended up doing time and material with him. And I can tell you that I was way over my head in that project. I
Sure.
remember it was actually at times it would cause I couldn't get work done some days because it was just so overwhelming, to
Hmm.
have all this tile work that needed to be done by myself. And
Yeah.
so I kind of look back on that, and things have changed significantly since then, because I thrive on that kind of stuff now, where
Mm.
I want to be dedicated to a job where I can just go from room to room tiling.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was intimidating at first, and that project ended up that actually was my first six-figure project. We
Hmm.
talked a little bit about that. Um, that ended up, I think it ended up around 130,000 in labor, just
Hmm.
labor alone. And then I don't remember what the materials were, but it was exhilarating once it was done, to see all the work I did and know all the hard work that went into completing everything and getting everything right. The sad part about that project was that the owners had hired an interior designer who made all the tile selections. So the owner didn't say yes, no. The designer just picked everything.
Hmm.
And the last day I was there talking to the owners, I asked her if she was happy with everything, and she said, "We're very happy with your work." She said, "But if I could do it again, I wouldn't put any marble in this house."
Oh,
And it was soul crushing for me because that's not what I want my clients to say at the end of the project. I want to be able to give input and
yeah.
make sure they get what they want. And so it was very satisfying, but a little soul crushing that these designers had kind of wandered astray from what their clients actually wanted. So it was a good experience overall. And I would say over the years, over the past 5 years, I really pushed to build relationships with high end builders, to find those high end builders, cold calling offices, literally just walking in and talking to people in their offices. And that's worked extremely well for me in building a solid base of high end builders. And I'm still working on it. I have slated this week to go cold call another builder that I've heard of. So
Cool.
in an area I don't do much work in, but my goal is always to get projects that are bigger than just a floor or a backsplash,
Yeah.
just because the logistics of those jobs just take up more of your time when you're moving from week to week to different jobs. So
Hmm.
to date, I've only had one other job that was a six-figure job. I've had five or six that were close.
Hmm.
Most of those are for one high-end builder who knows that I like large projects, and so
Hmm.
they feed large projects to me on a regular basis, one or two a year. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at today. But right now, I have all these little jobs till my next big job in October. So I'm getting a taste of what I used to do all the time. I
Sure.
just finished a couple of bathroom floors, and I got another kitchen floor slated for next week. So
Okay. Cool. Well, thank you for sharing that journey. I want to dig into kind of you mentioned, you brought attention to the mental struggle of having, all this work, $130,000 worth of marble installation by yourself, and sometimes showing up and not knowing how to proceed, or mentally maybe, maybe you can expand a little bit about what you meant. But for me, I've been there where mentally you just cannot understand how you're going to get from A to Z by yourself,
yeah,
or and it's just overwhelming. I've come to understand, I suppose, life as well as business is really a mental game, and if we're not sharp and we let the pressures get to us, it can really ruin us. So how did you overcome that challenge in particular?
well, so the way it kind of manifested itself was I can remember this one particular day, and it got to 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I realized I hadn't done anything,
Hmm.
and I was literally walking from space to space that I needed to tile, and just in my head, I'm like processing all this information,
Sure.
processing the finish, processing all this stuff. And one of the things I'm guilty of is overthinking. And on a project, I'll catch myself overthinking. And what I've learned over the years is, when you catch yourself overthinking, it's time to dive into the work.
Hmm.
Just dive into the work, get the process, start your process, follow your process through. And that's how I've kind of overcome the freezing in the moment of what do I do now? And you have to have the processes and clear processes in your own head of how you're going to handle these large job sites. And my process has been, as much as possible, I do all my prep work first.
Hmm.
Every bit of prep gets done before I start picking up tiles. That job in particular, that I did years ago, the builder went on vacation the week I started, and he didn't come back for 3 weeks. he came back in 3 weeks and I didn't have any tile installed, and he freaked out on me about it. And I was like, I've done shimming wall, like all the showers had to be shimmed, you know,
Yeah.
all this prep work had to be done. And I said, this is prep. This is not about installing tile. This is about getting ready to install tile. And so what I've learned is you got to follow your process, because when you step outside of your own processes, you end up getting into your own head, and then that's when kind of the freak out starts. But
Yeah.
that's really what I've focused on doing, is recognizing when I'm overthinking and it's time to dive into the work and not worry about how much work is ahead of me. And I just completed earlier this year. I completed a job. I think the job total was 106,000, and that was 4 bathrooms, big mudroom, laundry, hallway, kitchen back, marble kitchen backsplash, and I can honestly say on that project was probably the first time I didn't overthink anything. I just put my head down. And in this job, I had to start from the top and kind of finish my way down. They didn't, because of the way they were doing the house and all that stuff, I wasn't able to do my particular process all the way through. Started on the second floor, finished those bathrooms, and work my way down. But I can distinctly remember it felt like everything just went really smoothly. Like I was getting things done, and in great timeline, keeping with my timelines of what I want to accomplish, and hitting kind of the benchmarks of what my schedule needed to be. And so it was kind of neat to reflect on that initial big job years ago, where it was like panic. To today, the same type of job, it's like I'm thriving on it because it just suits me best.
Yeah.
So it definitely, it definitely is intimidating when you show up and there's 4 bathrooms to do and you're by yourself. So
Yeah. No kidding. No kidding. So how did that conversation go? You mentioned you did T&M, time and material, on that first one. How, did you ballpark the time for the contractor? You must have had a discussion about, hey, this is going to take 12 weeks, whatever it took. And, were you able to keep that, estimate of time?
I completely destroyed the schedule on that project. Let's see here. It's funny you mentioned it. So I'm actually pulling up the email that I sent to him. I'm just browsing it real quick. I know that project took me 9 months to complete.
Yeah.
And I think that I may have projected to him 4 or 5 months. And I was devastatingly off.
Yeah.
But I didn't have final tile selections when he had given me some parameters to kind of look at the job. I had looked at the job in person. He didn't have tile selections. And when I started the job, that's when the marble mosaic started showing up. And so the primary bathroom in particular was large. It was probably 120 square feet, the floor alone. And it was a marble mosaic from China specifically, and they looked like chain links. And so they were all small, like 1/4 inch wide, or however they were, 1/2 inch wide pieces that were different lengths and oriented like a chain. And so the first day I did maybe 4 rows across the length of this bathroom. And I was like, oh, this is not too bad. Came back the next day and I'm cleaning thin set out from between all these little tiles. And what I found is the polished tiles, that it was a polished mosaic. What I found is some of them were installed on the mesh upside down. So so as you looked across the floor, you could see all the ones that were not polished.
Yeah.
And not only that, but as the thin set was curing, it was actually breaking some of those longer pieces. And so I would spend one day running 3 or 4 rows. I would spend the second day cleaning out and pulling and resetting every tile that was broken or wrong.
Huh.
I allotted four. I remember this specifically because I had to have a conversation with the builder. I had allotted 4 days for it. It took me 10 days to complete the floor.
Yeah. Wow.
And so I think that was the first indication to both of us that the project was not going to be what we thought it was. And he said that, and he said they're just going to have to be okay with that.
Right.
And so in the end, I mean, it was a beautiful floor with a curbless shower, and that floor flowed into the shower to a linear drain in the back. A seamless, tileable linear drain. So it's really cool. But I can remember we were probably 7 or 8 months into the 9 months I was there, and he came to me. I had sent him an invoice the night before, and he came to me in the morning and he said, "Do you know what you're at for a total on this job?" And I had just looked at it and I said, "Yeah, I'm around 94,000." He goes, "I've never had a job where the tile costs so much money." He says to me, he said, "You're by far the most expensive subcontractor I've ever used." And so, and I said, "Well, is it going to be a problem?" He said, "No, they keep writing checks." He said, if they're not unhappy with anything, then I'm happy."
Sure. Yeah.
And in the end, he was very happy. I did ended up doing his daughter's shower floor because he did it and it leaked. So he had me come in and he tore it out for me, and I tied it all into the waterproofing. And that was 3 years ago. That hasn't leaked, so that's but
good.
but it was a good relationship, but I ended up being too expensive for him in the long run. He couldn't wrap his brain around continuing to do, and he does spec homes, so he's building that.
Yeah.
So he had brought me in to look at one, and I said, "Russ, we know we're not going to meet on price on this. You need to make money. I need to make money, and we both want to make a lot of money." So that's where we left it. We have a good relationship. I could call him today, and he calls me for tile advice. He has one of his carpenters he's trained to do the tile, and he actually calls me once or twice a year just to bounce something off of me. And his guy earlier this year sent me pictures of one of the showers that they had tiled together. So
cool.
Good relationship. Not particularly one that's been profitable for either of us in the following years, but a good relationship nevertheless.
Cool. Yeah. No, thanks for diving into that a little more and giving us those details. Appreciate it. Are you still T&M?
I'm not. That was the only project I've ever done that way. And I would say that it has worked out fairly well for me. In Rutland Tile Company, it's been good. When I first started, we were grossly undercharging. It's funny to remember the first big project I landed was with a builder with my old partner, and that was a 3-bathroom. There was a lot of tile in that house. 3 bathrooms, some kitchen tile, backsplash. We charged $12,000 for that project. Yeah. And I still frequently, it's on a lake not too far from me, and I drive by it, and every time I drive by it, I'm like, oh yeah, there's my $12,000, what should have been $50,000, And so the way we landed that job was we were doing sub work for a tile company around town, and we ended up sending in this $12,000 estimate for this project, and we got a phone call from the owner of the builder that the work was for. And what had happened is we didn't know, the builder approached us directly for the same job. He didn't tell us that we had already bid the job through. Oh. It was a mess. It really was a mess.
Yeah.
So we ended up giving him our price for this project, not knowing that we had already given a price to the tile store for it.
Yeah.
And they had marked it up, our estimate up 70%.
Sure. Yeah.
And he was just furious. And he's like, if you guys want the job directly, I'm giving it to you. We probably should not have done that, but we took it. We needed the work. It was early on. And that obviously tanked our relationship with the local tile store once the owner found out. But just looking back on that project, I think it was on that project I realized how much we were undercharging. we were wrapping everything, including materials, into a square foot price.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so we were losing out on materials a lot, like
Yeah.
just undercharging for materials and not charging markup, not charging any sort of handling fee or anything like that. And we were losing significantly.
Yeah.
Um, so that was interesting.
So, what does your bidding process look like today? Is it square foot pricing or just time estimated material
It's
markup?
Yeah, it's time estimated, so I'm doing a day rate.
Hmm.
Um, it's it's just a day rate applied. Obviously, it sometimes that flexes if people don't have finalized tile selections. Obviously,
Hmm.
that might
Hmm.
flex a little bit. I haven't
Sure.
ever found. I found I'm usually safe enough, conservative enough in my favor that I don't usually need to change things a lot. And then materials are separate with a handling fee tacked on top, which is essentially a markup.
Hmm. Hmm.
So labor separate, materials are separate, and that's kind of all. I don't really deal with a whole lot else. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where I land. So just looking at jobs, and I mean, I can churn out an estimate. If it's a large estimate, it might take me an hour. Smaller estimates are quick, 10, 15 minutes. Just plug in, and again, I kind of try to review jobs when I'm done, and I'm pretty I've become more efficient. I found in the past year, I realized that I'm a lot more efficient than I used to be. So those numbers are even more in my favor now
Hmm.
than they've ever been. So
Nice.
yeah, it's fun to see myself improving. If that makes sense. So
It does. It makes a lot of sense. And tracking that improvement, even mentally reflecting back on the feelings, the way things went, the prices you charged, and what you're charging today, how you're feeling today, type of clients. I mean, that's all growth that is good to reflect on and really celebrate. And that's what makes life and business fun, and rewarding is really the word, rewarding.
yes, yep.
Um, what has stopped you over the years? Like, I mean, I would have probably hired an apprentice, day one on that first big project. What has stopped you from hiring an apprentice?
Uh, Control issues.
Hmm.
I am absolutely a control freak when it comes to my job. It's the one area of my life that I have full control over, which
Hmm.
is my tile business, and so just mentally, definitely not 5 years ago, 4 years ago, probably not even 3 years ago. I wasn't mentally there to even be able to handle letting go like that.
Hmm.
And I would say I'm coming to a place where I'm realizing, I either have to make the jump or I'm going to be in trouble in another 5 years or something like that. I'm
Sure.
just, I'll break down enough that I'm not going to be able to do what I do now. And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
before that process starts, it's time to start, working towards hiring somebody. Um, so, um, and it's an excuse. I feel like it is hard to find good labor for sure. It's hard to find someone who's willing to pour into it, and so part of that is me being lazy, not wanting to do that work that it takes to find that person, bring them in, spend the time on them, and get them trained up. And so I would say that there a part of it has been my own control issues, wanting to control my stuff myself, and then the other part of it has definitely been that fear of, where do I find a person who's even willing to dump passion into what they do, and how do I
Hmm.
even convey that to them? So I have I have a couple of sons, and they're the ones at home are 13 and 15, and maybe they work with me sometimes to earn money. So
Hmm.
trying to get my feet wet, teaching them the ropes, and then giving them something to do, and sitting back and just coaching as I need to, but letting them do it, for sure. So, and I've had some conversations with nephews who are in their early 20s as well in the construction industry. So I'm working through the process in my own head, just starting to put feelers out, starting to just kind of get a feel for what I'm going to have to do to get there. And of course, the financial side of it is a concern as well, obviously. But I've had those things built into my numbers for probably a year or two now, as far as being able to pay someone a salary. So
Mm-hmm.
it's built into the numbers. I'll just have to have that portion of my budget will have to be dedicated once I hire someone. Can't
Sure.
use it for other stuff now. It's got to go towards that. So it's a process. And in my own head, I spend a lot of time processing.
Mm-hmm.
The once I get to the point where I've processed through it and I made a decision, that's when I don't need any more time. Let's pull the trigger, full speed ahead. So
Nice. Nice. You know that it's interesting you mentioned this, and you mentioned it earlier too. Is well, when we talked about um, the day you found yourself going from room to room, kind of, and you said you hadn't done anything. You know,
yeah,
really, you did something, and
yes,
you processed,
yeah,
and you visualized, and you took it in, and that's okay, right? In fact, uh, a lot of the great athletes, there's been scientific studies and groups, like they'll take 10 people and they'll practice basketball every day, like physically, and then
hmm
10 more people, and they just say, imagine making that free throw, imagine making the shots, and just in your mind. And what they found is the people that are imagining do just as well as the people that are actually playing the game. And so it's interesting to note, like, these types of things. Like, this is such an important part of our life and our business, is to process and to think forward. And I love the fact that you've been charging enough for a employee and before you even have one. I mean, talk about, thinking forward. That's great, Caleb. That's fantastic. Um, and you're really not that much different than most of us. Most tilers, artists, that we do have trouble hiring that first employee, letting go of the ropes a little bit, letting go of, control, and allowing, being willing to allow people to make their own mistakes on their own journey and
hmm
stuff like that. So that's great. I think you really laid out a good stepping stone for people to follow to get themselves, prepared in the future to hire someone, and it starts in that with the mental capacity,
yeah,
for sure, for sure.
yeah.
Um, so you prefer builder work. You're still doing large homes. You changed, you've gotten better at pricing them, estimating the time it'll take, et cetera, et cetera. And you prefer this. Would you say, what are some of the difficult things today to overcome? When I think of builder work, and maybe it's just my experience, but for me, it seems like builders, they want it done as efficiently and quickly as possible. How have you overcame this, or hasn't it been a challenge for your region? Maybe things just go slower.
It is what I found, and I learned this fairly early, and that was actually the builder that we did that 3 bathroom, $12,000 job for.
Hmm.
They're still around. I call them the bottom of the barrel of high end home builders.
Sure.
And so they're building, they make this claim about building high end homes, and but this little voice in the back of my head goes, high end home but cheap, and
Yeah.
so they are that production builder. They don't give their guys enough time to finish things nice. It's all about the schedule. It's all about getting it done so they can get paid. And so what happened, what I discovered, and this is actually something I learned on social media, is when I jumped into places like Tile Geeks and those places. And one of the things that a lot of those guys were saying is when you don't charge enough, you will always find your cheap customers. Always. If you're not
Hmm.
charging enough, you're never going to find the customers you actually need to be working for. And so we ended up doing, after that first project with that builder, we ended up working, doing most of their residential tile work for about a year and a half.
Mhm.
So it was during that year and a half time that I started taking steps to increasing our prices. The first
Mhm.
step I took was separating the material cost out of the square foot price.
Mhm.
So I listed off the materials, I priced the materials, I added a markup to the materials, and I listed them separately on an estimate. I didn't tell my business partner I was doing this, and I probably got away with that for about 3 months before he noticed. And he asked me if we got a job, and I said yeah, and he's like, well, can I see the estimate? So he hadn't been looking at estimates for,
Mhm.
3 months, 6 months. So I
Wow.
handed it to him, and he goes, we're charging that much and people are still hiring us? And I said, yeah. I said, I'm just selling your talent. I said, that's the easy part. And to this day I say that's all I was doing, was just selling his talent.
Mhm.
And so within the span of 2 years, we went from charging $22 a square foot in showers to $44 a square foot. So I doubled it.
Mhm.
Floors doubled and tripled, from
Mhm.
$6 a square foot to anywhere from $15 to $18 a square foot.
Mhm.
Um, and so it was about 2 years of that, and I realized I wasn't getting any more jobs from this builder,
Mhm.
and I sent the owner an email to check in on an estimate I sent, and I said, hey, what about this job? I sent the estimate a while ago, and what's going on with it? And he said, I probably still have the email somewhere. He said, uh, something like, I regret to inform you, you're not the lowest bidder.
Mhm.
And it was basically, he told me, he said, you're too expensive.
Yeah.
And so I emailed him back and I said, thank goodness, I'd be worried if I was. And that was the end of it. And it
Sure.
wasn't a bitter parting or anything like that. It was
Yeah.
2 years ago. I needed work. So I literally popped into his office and I said, hey, do you have any jobs that are, budget's not an issue? And I ended up doing two nice projects for them. Um,
Nice.
Worked out well. And when we initially worked with them, they were on a 30-day billing cycle. You might wait 30 days, you might wait 60 days to get your check after
Mhm.
the work was completed.
Mhm.
And they've since changed it because they couldn't find anyone to work for them. So he's like, small guys like you just bill us, we're going to send you a check.
Mhm.
And so that was probably, I don't remember specifically, but I don't think I ever got to a day rate with the pricing in that initial business.
Mhm.
The day rate was a big thing on social media with guys talking about that. When I started Rutland Tile Company, I didn't do anything by the square foot whatsoever.
Hmm.
Once in a while, I'll plug in the total square footage of the job, and I'll divide the cost of the labor by the square footage, just to get an idea of what, if someone asked me what would your square foot price be, and I probably wouldn't tell most people what it is, because you know it ends up being anywhere from $75 to $90 a square foot in the end.
Mhm.
Materials and labor, that's where it ends up.
Yeah.
And to look back at, the $6 a square foot on a floor, and now it's pretty much all lands within that square foot price all the time. And that's
Yeah.
that's where that's kind of the sweet spot I found.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
um I don't remember what your question was because I talked too much.
That's okay. I don't remember either.
So one of the things I think I touched on with you earlier before we started was how intimidating large projects can be.
Yes.
You work up a price and you're like, ugh, that's a lot of money. There's no way they're going to accept that.
Yeah.
Um, and I know, because I worked in so many different trades in construction, I've done pretty much everything. I know that it can be beneficial to look at the whole scope of the picture. And for guys that have been solo tile guys forever, that can be difficult because they're not thinking about the fact that your $20,000 job is a $600,000 house that's being built, or in this case, over $1 million.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
most houses that most tile guys work in are not $1 million homes anymore. They're higher.
Yeah.
And so even like these large projects, there's a guy from my church who's been in construction for a long time, and he's since retired and things like that. And I shared with him what my estimate was on a project for next year, which is another 6-figure project, and it like blew his mind. He couldn't fathom how someone could charge so much for doing tile. And I said, well, the picture you have to look at is that's probably a 10 to $15 million home,
Right.
and $100,000 of 10 or $15 million is a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
And that's the perspective that you have to have when you're a solo tile guy doing large projects. Is you have to understand, first of all, understand the client you're working for, because if you don't, you're working for the wrong person. You send them a 6-figure estimate, they're just going to turn you down. But keep in mind that these homes that have 5, 6 bathrooms, they're multi-million-dollar homes, and the number for the tile is really just a number on a piece of paper, and it really doesn't matter when they're spending 10 million or 15 million on a home, or even less, above 5 million. That really doesn't. It doesn't make a big difference. So that's the thing. And probably the past year and a half, I've shifted my mindset to that, because I started pricing more of these projects for one particular builder. And every time I was sending one, I was like, man, I can't even fathom, they're getting this number, and they're like, whoa. And then that at some point, my mind just processed through that and shifted to that. Well, wait a minute. They're already spending millions of dollars. That much for the tile they want is not a whole lot. So, knowing the big picture of what's going on in construction, so that you can make a fair comparison of what you're charging is valuable. It is.
Yeah.
If someone's building a Habitat for Humanity house for $250,000, you're not going to charge $50,000 for tile. You're not going to be able to, because they can't afford it. So that big picture is really, really important. I think kind of tying into that with large scale projects and being solo, is managing expectations, right? If they want it done in a month, that's not even possible for me. And so starting right off the bat, well, what kind of timeline are you looking at for this house? And the builders I work for already know there's no rush. I always tell everyone there's no such thing as a tile emergency.
Right.
So
Right.
I don't come running no matter what you say. And so managing expectations is valuable, knowing your own speed, knowing how long the project's going to take you. I know that if I have to do a bathroom with a floor and a full tile shower, I know it's roughly going to be 3 weeks. That may not be 3 weeks of solid 8-hour days in that bathroom, but from start to finish, it's a 3-week process. It's going to be roughly 15 days. And so that's what I tell them. Each bathroom's going to be 15 days. Yeah. And I've gotten to the point where that's probably almost never the case anymore, maybe 10 or 12 days. But I always undersell and over deliver. I'm always, it's going to be slower than I think it is. So, and that served me very, very well, I would say, especially now, since most of my builders are guys I do work for on a regular basis. They already know all this, and they're not worried about timelines and schedules. And I think that kind of pushes into what you were asking about, those large projects, and you think of builders as I need this done right away, and that's very true. And I would say it's true. I don't know if it's a majority of Vermont builders. It probably is. The goal is to find the builders who have the same mentality as I do. And the mentality is it takes time to produce quality, and it also takes money to produce quality. Once you find those guys, you just stick with it. As long as you treat them fair, they're going to treat you fair. And all the other guys, you might work for a cheap builder once, you probably will never work for them again, and that's okay. But for me, I've spent the past few years trying to build up that base of high-end builders that are just going to use me over and over again, and hopefully stop doing one floor here and one floor there.
Yeah.
all together at some point within the next 3 or 4 years. Hopefully, that's the goal.
Yeah.
And I would say that Vermont, probably the construction industry in Vermont's insulated from more what happens on, you know, countrywide. A lot of out of state, second, third homeowners, they're vacationing here, they're skiing here. They have a lot more money to play with.
Sure.
And so there probably is a higher density of high end builders.
Yeah.
Whereas, densely populated areas like New Jersey, we know that can be a struggle for good contractors to compete with what's going on down there.
Mm.
And I would say New England's probably a little bit unique once you get into the Northeast, into Vermont and in New Hampshire and places like that. So
Mm. Yeah, I've been thinking about, and thank you for remembering and answering the question. Appreciate it. And I've been
we
thinking a
got
lot
there.
about what you just said. I used to, when I started this podcast, I would say things like, it doesn't matter where you live. Well, I was on the coast in California, and now I'm on the Gulf Coast of Florida in a more densely populated area and more cheap labor, a lot of excess of cheap labor. And it certainly does. I've come full circle. It does matter where you live. They still sell a lot of Lamborghinis around here. There's lots of wealthy people and big homes. But to kind of, I've spent a few years, introducing myself, and this is another question I had for you too, is the outreach. But it does matter where you live, and to think about it and to kind of plan. And I'm just bringing this up for younger guys or even older guys who are like, man, why am I struggling so much? It could be where you live. It could be, just your presentation. It could just be a lot of things. But think, I know people in, like you said, ski resort towns or a lake kind of resort where people are maybe building maybe their third home, fourth home, type of thing, where they're going to be there, host Christmas and Thanksgiving, or what have you, just a few times a year. This is where, a condensed amount of money is. And guess what? The smaller the place, uh, there's not a lot of labor. There's not a lot of skilled tradesmen.
Exactly.
So it's kind of a really unique situation. So a little bit of forethought goes a long ways to that. So I want to ask you now about your outreach. What does that look like when you call a new builder? Do you try to get in face to face with them? Do you lean heavily on, hey, we work for A, B, C builders that they probably recognize the name? Like, what is your process for outreach?
I would say, because I'm so all over the state, a
Hmm.
lot of the builders don't necessarily know each other.
Hmm. Okay.
And so that people have asked me, and I think in the one situation where someone asked me and they knew the other builder, I'm pretty sure that backfired on me pretty
Oh,
heavily.
okay.
Yeah, I'm positive it did. I did, and I'll just touch on, because I think this is important.
Sure.
I did one project for a builder I'd never worked for before, and they do fantastic work. They do the kind of work I want to be involved in. It was a backsplash, and it was that handmade tile that everybody freaks out over. Uh,
Zalige.
it was the
Zalige.
Liege tile. It was my first backsplash in the Liege, and so um, I did. I didn't. I would say I didn't install it like as a leash. I spaced out my grout joints. I made it look. It looked. It didn't. It wasn't perfect, but it was well blended.
Hmm.
And they were different shades, and I took extra care to make sure that I didn't, put all the light shades in one and the dark shades in the other. And the owner of the company came and he complimented it. He said, "You've paid a lot of attention to making sure it's all spread out," and he was extremely happy.
Hmm.
So I went in, finished up the backsplash. I ended up having to go back. They ran out of tile,
Hmm.
so I ended up charging extra as well on top of it. And I went back and dropped off my final invoice at their office, and he was there, and I handed him the final invoice. And so I handed it to him, and he goes like this, and he sets it over in this tray. So we talked for a while, and he's talking himself up. We have all these multi-million-dollar remodels. We have a ton of work coming down the pipelines, and he's telling me all this stuff. And I took off down the road, and 15 minutes later, my phone rings, and it's him, and he's yelling at me.
What?
He's literally yelling at me. I've never paid anyone this much for a backsplash before, this and that. And if that's the way your pricing is, we're never going to work together again. And so I let him go on, and he wound down, and I said, I'm curious. I said, I gave you guys an estimate for this project, and your project manager accepted it. I said, where's the disconnect? And he was embarrassed. He said, well, if that's the case, I guess I owe you an apology. So my estimate ended up being $700 over their budget for the tile portion of it.
Yeah.
He never called me again. Never. I mean, he was embarrassed. He hadn't done his due diligence. His guy didn't do his due diligence and make sure that it matched the budget. It was not my fault at all.
No.
So another high-end builder I was trying to get in with, I threw the name of that company at him, and oh yeah, we know Sean, blah, blah, blah. I'm positive they called him, and I'm positive he didn't have anything good to say. So
sure.
I had a couple of nibbles from them, and then they disappeared. They went silent and disappeared. So I think that backfired on me. So, but in general, my preference in outreach is in person.
Yeah.
I want to shake someone's hand. I want to look them in the eyes. I don't want to be cold calling on the phone. I don't want a conversation with a faceless person. In the face to face, because meeting face to face gives me a better gauge of how to interact with these people and how to sell myself the best. And you still have to hit up. I mean, you still have to hit up quite a few people to find them. I have a list that's probably got like 30 different builders and designers that I've hit up over the years, and probably out of those 30, I might have gotten 10%. You know, I might have gotten work from 10%, but that's pretty good for me. I'm a solo guy, so I want to be face to face. I have hooked one builder with an email because he didn't have an office. So I sent out 5 or 6 emails, and I got out of that. I got one long-term relationship out of that. So
Good.
one 30-second email got me a long-term relationship that's yielded probably $50,000 or $60,000 in the past couple of years.
Nice.
So to me, Vermont's a very in-person thing. People want to see you. They want to know who's working in their home. Again, this doesn't work for everyone. Some people don't want to see you, but Vermont, I want to be selling face to face. That's how I am. I want to be doing business face to face. I don't want to be doing remote stuff at all. And out of those in person, so I'll literally schedule, like now I have a down week. I have at least one builder that I've heard of that I need to go visit and cold call. That'll be a cold call. And there's another one. There's another one that I tried to land a job with, and I was just over their customer's budget, but they're supposed to throw me some other work. But I did that large project I did down the road from their office. So the project manager got to come to the job site while I was working there.
Nice.
And see my work.
Yeah.
So yeah, to me, the cold calling is very important to me. If you're selling yourself, the tile sells itself. You got to sell you. You got to sell yourself as the installer. To me, I know this has been kind of a topic once in a while on social media. People asking, how do you dress when you go cold calling? And there's the slicked up guys, right? They want to put the cologne on and button up their shirts. And I'm like, no, if you come to Vermont and do that, you're not going to do well, because I'm the guy doing the work. I try to put on, if I'm going to go out for a day and cold call, I'll put on my work shirt, Rutland Tile Company, and I'll put on a clean pair of shorts I've never worn to work before.
Sure.
You know, so at least I'm not completely just covered in thin set.
Right.
So presentation, I'm usually this scruffy. So I found it's more about how you present yourself rather than the presentation of what you're wearing. And, you know, just don't show up with curse words on your shirt, please. I know a lot of guys in the trades have an attitude sometimes. It's like, just leave your attitude at the door, be professional. You really need to. You need to be professional. So I would say that's the thing that's yielded the most for me, and I know that this is a conversation as well because we all get busy, right? The solo guys especially, and it's like neglecting my schedule and not realizing I needed to get some jobs filtered into my schedule to fill it in. You got to be paying attention all the time.
Mm.
Find yourself a down day. It's nice to take that extra day off and relax, but some days, if you haven't, if it's been a couple of months since you've cold called, spend that day cold calling. It's not hard. Just find some offices to visit them. I'll this week I'll call some of the builders and try to find some small jobs to fill in the gaps in my schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll probably have some stuff for me, but you got to be paying attention all the time. We've talked about marketing with tile money, right? That the time to be marketing is now, not when you're slow, because when you're
Yeah.
slow, you're probably not going to get the results.
Right.
So, as solo business owners, or even just a 2 or 3 man show, you got to be paying attention all the time to your schedule, all the time. It requires attention all the time. Otherwise, you'll find yourself starving.
Yeah.
So, and the work is
Yeah.
out there to be had for sure, but you got to look for it.
Well, this is another great topic. That balance of, I mean, you're running small business owners, even if you have an employee or a few employees, how do you balance that, out in the field installing tile, managing projects maybe with, hey, I really need, I mean, I'm at the point, where you need 6 hours, 8 hours of office time a week. So what's your ideal schedule? Like what keeps you grounded and looking and, being in the office? I mean, are you shooting for like 45 weeks of work a year or 40 or one day
I
off a week?
I think my I think my official yearly schedule is 40 weeks
Okay.
or 42 weeks. I forget what it is.
Sure.
But that's my entire business budget's based off of
Mm-hmm.
40 work weeks or something like that. This year, one of the things I did right off with Rutland Tile Company is I hired a bookkeeper. I've been paying a bookkeeper with Rutland Tile Company for 5 years.
Yeah.
I'm not going to handle my taxes. I'm not going to handle categorizing my transactions even in QuickBooks. I don't even handle that anymore.
Mm-mm.
You can do that, but everything requires mental energy and time. And especially if you're solo, you don't have time for that. You really don't. You don't. If you're busy, you don't have time for it. I have a hard enough time, filing all my receipts, for each month,
Yeah.
which is something I have to catch up on this week for last month and this month. So, that's a big thing. The other thing, and I know this is tough for guys that like to work hard and solo guys, is this year I've begun the transition of moving to a 4-day work week.
Mm-hmm.
In that fifth, so it usually ends up being Monday is the day that I take off, and I see the chiropractor every Monday for obvious reasons. And so that's Mondays are like I tell people I hold that day loosely. Things come up. I need to schedule appointments. I need to look at a job that's inconvenient to go and look at while I'm traveling to a job. But the goal is to go to a 4-day work week period and in the field. So that would be on the job site installing tile 4 days a week.
Sure.
The 5th day can be office work. It can be a day off. It can be whatever it needs to be.
Yeah.
And I know that's hard for a lot of guys, but it's if you're working hard, and tile is a hard trade, you need to not be installing 7 days a week, 6 days a week. Really, if you're doing that, you're doing a huge disservice to yourself and your own health. And your business doesn't do better because you work 7 days a week. It really doesn't. It's going to suffer because you work like that. So that's kind of how I hold that. Again, I tell people there are days when I just go into work late. If I need to write an estimate, I may just go into work late that day.
Yeah.
It's less about how many hours I put in and more about hitting those benchmarks of my processes on the job site.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't need to work 8 hours a day. I need to get X, Y, and Z done. And if that takes 8 hours, that's what it takes. If it takes 6 hours, I'm going home after 6 hours.
Yeah.
Um, my old partner and I had a fast and easy saying, no thin set after 2 o'clock. You didn't mix any thin set after 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
Every time you mix thin set after 2 o'clock, especially if you're a slow guy, it'll be 5 o'clock before you get out of work. And that's again, most thin set doesn't last that long with me anymore, but it's just one of those little things that you have to think about. Okay, if I start this next process, what is that going to do for the rest of my day?
Yeah.
It's going to take me till 10 o'clock to finish it.
Yeah.
And is it worth it? Some days, yeah, you're going to need to work a 10-hour day to get a job wrapped up so you can go on vacation so they don't have something linger. There's always something. I'm not saying you never do that.
Right.
What I am saying is you shouldn't do that for 52 weeks out of the year.
Yeah.
You shouldn't do that. It's not good for you. Tile was made for us. We weren't made for tile. So,
like that.
we don't exist so that tile can be installed. Tile can be installed because we exist. And that's kind of the same as there's no such thing as a tile emergency.
Yeah.
It's not. I love tile. Don't get me wrong. I'm pretty passionate about tile. In construction, it's my favorite trade. It by far is, to me, the most satisfying trade, but it's not my life. It just isn't, and it can't be. And you can go too far one way or the other, but that's my 2 cents for the whole thing. So
Sure. Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you, Kaleb. I can't believe it's almost an hour that we've been
might
talking.
have to do a part 2.
Yeah. This has been very, very good conversation. We covered a lot of ground. Did we miss anything that you wanted to highlight on?
I don't think so. I think we could talk about a lot of other things, but I think we covered the main points of what we talked about. So
yeah, no, I appreciate diving into this subject a little bit. I've kind of built my company the opposite of you. I've built it on the smaller jobs, one shower at a time, bathroom floor, backsplash, etc. This year was our first custom, 6-figure job, which I'm very happy about. It was a learning process, and I'm definitely considering the company wants us to bid on another one, which is going to be twice as much tile work. So I'm going to raise my prices and bid on it and go forth and see what happens. Cause I can definitely see and understand the benefits of obviously being at a project for 4 or 6 months longer than having to bounce around. And so it's a topic that I'm continuing to learn and educate myself on. So I appreciate you sharing your knowledge with me and the audience, Kaleb. So appreciate everything you do. You're very active in the Facebook Tile Money group. Appreciate that. Always sharing your wisdom and knowledge there as well. So with that, I guess I'll wrap up. Kaleb, you want to say goodbye to the tile friends?
all right, really appreciate you as well, Luke, and for everyone out there, the best thing you can do is open your mind up and learn new things. You don't necessarily always have to accept what you've learned. You don't have to implement it into your systems or your company, but the more you learn, the more you're going to grow in your own business. So
Lovely. Thank you, Kaleb.
all right, thanks, Luke.